Hi, friends and family. And like Loki shared with us in the beginning of this episode, today we're going to talk about responsibility, motivation, and reward. This is a huge topic in my house. This is the struggle that we have been going through, well, all of teenage years into this new early 20s, this young adulthood. And parents, especially my neurodivergent parents, I'm talking to you because we're in that same like mind, like source kind of situation. But this is also for my neurotypical parents. We have all dealt with this, from toddlers to, I hear terrible twos in my head when I say toddlers, but twos really aren't that bad.
No, threes, fours
and fives, and 5-year-olds now, especially when you see them with the hands on the hips telling you exactly what it is and how it's going to go down. And that just then includes our middle school.
Yeah, and then it goes all the way up.
And then we go to teenagers.
It gets worse with each coming year.
Scary, yeah.
Well, the more vocal expression, and I don't even want to say vocal expression because,
or
man,
even
I bet
the passive aggressive.
Personality.
Body language, the eyes, those eyes.
Well, can you imagine a parent that signs? They'd probably get even more. I mean,
yeah.
The more that the child develops, the more you got to emphasize in the fact that they got to get their tasks done.
Yes. Yes. And so when we're looking at this, guys, and we're looking at responsibility,
motivation.
Well, let's go back to responsibility first, because responsibility is what starts. And responsibility, we can look at that as playing with Play-Doh. We could talk about it playing with checkers, because think about it, we start with playing with Play-Doh. And Play-Doh, when it comes out of the can, is just this cylinder blob. But yet the cylinder blob, with the right directions, can turn into a school bus. Then we go into being in elementary school. And how many times have we all, for us, think about it, we made pillows in home ec. All of us made pillows in home ec. Us Gen Xers, Loki, watch out.
I made a blanket.
You made a blanket?
I made a blanket at home ec.
Oh, you are younger than me. So
Not by much. But yeah, I mean, they used to, and the responsibility of learning not just how to handle something, but also the respect of cleaning it up or reorganizing it, which is usually the difficult part for the young learners. Yep, to follow through all the way.
The rules of the task.
Exactly.
The rules of the task, right.
These are all parts of the responsibility. So especially our kids today, and I say especially our kids today, and I almost want to say neurodivergent, but I'm not, because almost all of our children have ADD, ADHD, OCD, ODD. I mean, I could be a rapper here with just alphabet soup of everything that we've got going on. But the reality is, responsibility in today's society has become a struggle.
Yeah.
Yes.
We have applications that have been developed. We have old school paper. We have task lists, all ways to keep us on track to get the responsibilities completed. Task assigned to us completed.
But then comes the other problem. The motivation of trying to get the responsibility done in the first place. Say, for example, oh yeah, no, I really should get all of this cleaning done, but I really want to go over to the arcade, or I really want to go over to the bar, or I really want to go on Discord. I want to do all these things instead of doing what I've been tasked to do, and that's the other hurdle you have to get done in order to have to go through with the task.
Right.
Because, sure, we could have all these schedules, we could have all these tools, we could have all these people telling us to do this certain thing, and we could have all the tools in the world, but it all comes down to you and how you are going to deal with the situation. It comes from deep inside you that you have to say, all right, I guess I just have to do this, and I don't care about anything else. I have to focus on specifically this. This is something that I myself have been trying to work on for a while now, mostly around sleep schedules, say around chores.
Why don't you share with the viewers about what happened to you the other day? Do you remember when you didn't do your chores, your task? You had to give me the power cord.
Yes.
And what did you say? It only took how many minutes?
3 minutes.
So why don't you explain to our viewers so they understand and relate?
It took 3 minutes just to clean my room. 3 minutes of just folding clothes and getting a bed done to organizing some shelves, and each took around like 3 minutes each, or like around 1 minute. And all I could have done was simply unplugged a little bit. And now I'm not saying,
Help explain that. Unplug from what? So you got to remember,
video games.
you are understanding it in general,
Yes.
but our audience wasn't there. So when you're on this podcast, you've got to help our audience understand what happened. You got distracted
Yes.
with your social environment, which happened to be online, which
Yes.
would be just like us in our day,
Yep.
going to the park,
Watching
riding
reels.
our bike.
Yeah.
You know, we're all going to meet after school, and the
Mhm.
parents saying, well, you can't go until your chores are done. And we're like, yeah, AMF, mom and dad, we'll see you on the fly.
Your motivation got interrupted by what you wanted to do instead of just
Exactly.
focusing on what you wanted to do. Instead of focusing on what you were tasked to do, and so you could have reaped the benefits of being there with a job well done.
Sure.
Yes.
There's an old saying in applied behavior analysis, and we talk about it more in terms of respect for employees, but it's like what I have to do versus what I want to do.
Yes.
And those are very competing things. I have to do certain chores. I have to do certain tasks by a due date. But I really want to do the following. And
Yeah.
sometimes the motivation and rewards for doing what you want to do outweigh what I have to do. And so this is where, like you said, responsibility comes in, where responsibility has to be the trigger to unbalance those scales. To say, I know I want to do this, but I have
What's
to do
funny
this.
thing is that, like, I remember that exact thing from a morning announcement from one of the schools. I don't know which school, but it was one of the schools. And
Okay.
it was just like, would I need to get my homework done, or would I want to read comic books? And that's basically the entire struggle of motivation. And so, sure, we talked about how the struggle of responsibility is, we could already go all the way back to the scheduling episode, where if you don't have a schedule, you're going to be unorganized, you're going to be scatterbrained, you're going to be like all these different types of like confused on what you need to do first. But even if you get the schedule done, you have to focus on yourself. That motivation, trying to get away from all your other distractions to get the task done. So, before we move on to rewards, how do you think we could solve the motivation issue?
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. This is a struggle in our house.
Yes.
I'm going to say it's probably a struggle in everybody's house.
I think every parent that's listening, every caregiver that's listening, they're going to have the
Yeah.
you know, whether it's
Because-
a 17-year-old or a 6-year-old or a 48-year-old,
They all
or, you
want,
know, it
like-
really is a universal thing.
Yeah, it's like you have to go over to get a package, but right there, the bar is right there, and say, I could get a few drinks, and then that starts the downward spiral. Does
This
it make
drinking
sense?
thing from a house
Watch out.
of non-drinkers,
Watch out.
and he's not 21 yet, and I'm like,
But
what
he's
is-
I
generalizing
understand
to
the
the
spiral,
No, I
though.
get
Yeah,
you.
that's
I
right.
understand the spiral.
But it
Exactly.
could
It's
be
the
a-
same thing for you, Twisty Treat.
Yes, it's like no, Twisty Treat is a different thing because
Why?
because I only do it on weekends.
But it's still, that's your reward, though, correct?
Yes, that is a reward, but that's later. That's for later
okay,
because
well,
we're still
well,
talking.
then how are you getting motivated? See, we're talking about motivation now.
Well, and that's an interesting example too, because I thought you were going to go somewhere else. Not that it's just later, but there's a financial cost to it. So like motivation is kind of a tricky thing. If it's something that's really rewarding
Mhm.
to me, but there's low effort, there's low response effort to get it. It's readily accessible, like your internet, your Discord, all that, and I don't have to pay anything else. I'm going to do that, right? I'm going to get that reward.
Yeah,
Versus
because
something that I have
it's
to
easy.
drive, I have to go get it, I have to pay money and all that kind of stuff.
yeah, getting Twisty Treat might be its own RMR in the first place,
It could be,
but
but it may not be the thing immediate. It may not, be more delayed.
you want immediate satisfaction instead of doing this long, arduous task where
Right.
you're like, all right, I gotta fold all the
Well,
laundry.
In the employment realm, we know that there are employees that are motivated by positive praise.
Mm-hmm.
We all come as adults to work for compensation. So we show up for work with the reward of being compensated for the tasks that we complete during our specific time.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
financial compensation.
Yes, okay? So we come to work for that. kids come to school for the report card, which, you know, we can give our
Various
names,
other
but
rewards.
they come to school for social interactions,
Mm-hmm.
and they go to school for basically the finality of the diploma.
Yep.
But
they get the grades in order to get to the diploma.
thing is, the kids don't know that. You know what the kids' rewards are?
What?
Getting to the weekend. Getting to Friday, having that fun
That's a really
Friday.
good point.
That is because sure, that's the parents' reason of why they send their kid over to the school. But
That's a good way of looking at
but
it.
for the kids, it's more so like, all right, we're gonna get this done. We're gonna get this done. I'm gonna keep walking through it. I'm gonna keep walking through it, and it's Friday, so that way I can relax, sleep in, have a fun day.
Okay, but so I hear you.
Mm-hmm.
I acknowledge what you're saying, and I would agree that 90% of society does, and I'm going to actually increase that because we're percentages in our house.
Yeah.
Go figure, data doesn't lie. I'm going to guesstimate that we're probably about 98%
Mm-hmm.
of society agrees with you in that aspect. But I want to take a different perspective, a different way of looking at it. Because I'm a business owner,
Yeah.
and because you're in the household with me as a business owner,
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a regular work week. I
Yeah.
work 7 days a week.
Yes.
If one of my buildings has an alarm go off and it is Sunday night and it's 2 a.m., I'm here at 7 or 2 a.m.
Yeah.
on a Sunday night.
Because one of your employers is like,
If I have a kid that's in crisis, or a parent or an employee that's in crisis and it's after hours, I'm still there.
yeah.
Mhm.
There isn't a 9 to 5 and then all of a sudden Pam turns the clock off, and it's not been that way for a decade.
Mm-hmm.
So in my life, and even in our life, because we're in the same household, if you think about that, what do you say when you're like, Mom, only 4 days left in the week? I'm like, no, because then that means we're living for 2 days a week. And I would like people to change and shift and be happy and generate positivity by just waking up and being grateful that, hey, I woke up this morning, because waking up is not a guarantee.
Right.
So if we are not working our entire 5 days for 2 days, and we change the perspective, then we change responsibility, motivation, reward,
Yeah.
because we are not living our life for 48 hours. And I think if we start to look at it in that aspect, then you can change the way that you focus, which is the responsibility to motivation,
Yeah.
because that's the focus that is needed.
Mhm.
So if I have a task that I need to do, and I'm under the mindset that, oh, I'm going to get all these tasks done so I can make it to Saturday, you're losing 5 days where you could have the best 5 days for 2.
Can I say something?
Of course.
I wanted to say that, though, that may be also be the case for some children as well, because I'm sort of made that Friday guesstimate on sort of like a general thinking. That general thinking, wow, what kind of? But
Okay, but
what
no, I
wanted
get
to
you. So
wait,
how do you motivate them then instead of just Saturday and Sunday?
you see,
That's where I would shift
you
it
see,
then.
Ah.
it depends on the child, because depends on how their thought process is.
Absolutely.
But they could also think about, say, like, hey, I still get 3 hours of once my chores are done, I get to do whatever I want. I get to have my own experience living and existing.
But can't we do that on the daily, though?
So that sounds like it's more like a daily reward.
Yes,
Yeah.
there's a short-term reward and the long-term reward. There's always going to be that.
I kind of like that.
Yeah, there's an old expression about, we used to say, years ago, we used to say we live to work. That mind shift has kind of gone away.
Yes.
We now should be,
We work to
it's
live.
work to live.
Well, you see, that old saying comes from the fact of, like, I assume there wasn't barely any socializing during work in the first place. There wasn't any sort of talk during the work, and it was mostly just for work. The talking was for work and not because of work.
Yeah, yes, and kind of, yes. So, way back before your mom and I were even born, right? The industrial era,
Yes.
it was you lived to work because it was a means to support family. It was a means to support bills, and people were working 6 days a week, 7
Yes.
days a week. Industrial era. Fast forward, it's more of an entrepreneurial mindset to live to work, right? Because they're so motivated and so driven to work, but it doesn't sustain.
Mhm.
It's very difficult to
You'd lose
sustain.
your
Plus-
motivation.
Plus, you lose, and you lose experience. You lose a lot of things for your life. So,
Eventually, you lose your
so the mindset
responsibility.
of I work to live is really about opening up the door to say, I'm working, I enjoy what I do, but I'm doing it so that I can,
Bingo.
so
I can move on to
contact the rewards of
better
life.
things.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny that we talk about this and I'm listening, and what goes through my head, because you both know me very well, is this is how broken our school system is. When you asked back in our day,
Sometimes it feels bad to hear it.
well, I'm the
think I know where
advocate
this is
or
going.
whatever. I'm like, in our Gen X day.
In our Gen X day, yeah.
So, Loki, school, the way school is set up is to mirror the way the employment sector was set up.
Mm-hmm.
The school system where kids come to school at 7:30, have breakfast, start school at 8 o'clock, then they go through the bell system, was set up and structured purposely. This is the part you need to understand. John Taylor Gatto, years and years ago, and I want to say it was in either the early 90s, late 80s, and I may be completely wrong on the time frame, but wrote a book called Weapons of Mass Instruction.
Mm-hmm.
So this book clearly is identified that the school system was set up in order to provide us with factory workers, meaning we were already shaping our children to be prepared for the lunch bell system, to be prepared for the class system, to sit down at their desk.
To line up. To walk in a line.
To follow the leader. I mean, think about it. We start in kindergarten with the line leader, with jobs, with roles, responsibilities, and duties, and we're making little robots.
Yep.
And I've seen, you know what high school I went to, where we literally line up to go to the next class like an actual conveyor belt.
No, absolutely. And so if we are teaching our children for decades now, because this goes way back, Loke, to even before Manny and I are in elementary school. The same systems were back when Gigi, your grandmother, was in school. They have not changed.
Right.
And so if we have been building, shaping in our ABA world, shaping our children to be factory workers, to be robots, to not step out of line, then no wonder we are having this huge problem with society in regards to responsibility. How do I stay motivated in order to complete my task independently?
And get the reward.
And then how do I get rewarded that is for me and not for the group, for the individual?
How do I get...
Well, we're not doing it because we're not teaching them to be individual.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this probably is a good opportunity for us to like shift gears and say, okay, so if I'm a parent, I'm a caregiver, I'm a business owner, how do we solve this when there's so many external variables that are against us? As a father, I have to compete with the social media. I have to compete with the social norm behaviors. I even have to compete with whatever's going on in their school.
Yes.
Right? And then try to drive their responsibility at home, understand their motivation.
Can I say something?
Go ahead, yeah.
I do think the way you say that, and switching gears, how do I be the parent, caregiver, job owner? There's a reason why I said it in this specific way of RMR, because both R's, the responsibility and the reward, are both given by the person who gives the task, whether it be yourself or another person or a higher up.
Okay.
The task giver is the R. The M is yourself, is the person that is meant to do the task. It is meant to be the task master, the person that is meant to say, all right, time to raise myself up because I know that I will do this and I will get this.
Okay.
And that this is given by the R. The R.
So then let's walk something through for Manny and I. In your rationale, explain to us a chore that we all doing dishes.
Yes.
Okay, so walk your RMR, responsibility, motivation, and reward. If you have been assigned, so the responsibility that I have assigned you is that the dishes are your responsibility.
Yes. So I would get myself say, okay, so the dishes are my responsibility. I would need to motivate myself by saying, okay, I'm going to not be doing any other Discord. I'm going to be focusing entirely on the dishes, and I know exactly what the dishes should look like. So, and if there's any help, I would ask you. So I would do the dishes, because I would know that once I get the dishes done, my reward would be either like once I get all my chores done, or if it's just the dishes, my reward would be going upstairs and going back on my Discord. That would be my reward, and I've already set it up myself for the motivation, and you've tasked me with the responsibility.
Okay, so as a parent, we both have been here. Then
Still.
how would we, well, yeah, I'm living it, come on now.
We're still there.
So then, even for you, there are times.
There are times where the motivation does get blocked by various things.
Yes,
And
and
adults have this problem as well.
Oh, absolutely. We all go through this. You know, we've talked about it. The reason that we've gone to every other week filming the podcast is because we want to eliminate Pam's burnout on top of everything else. So I feel you. I completely understand.
And do you know what's the funniest thing? I'm gonna let you continue. But even little toddlers have this problem. Going back all the way back to your Play-Doh, you say, oh yeah, here, little Timmy, can you make a banana? But I really want to make a house right now. Their motivation is being blocked by themselves because they want to make a house with the yellow Play-Doh.
So how do we get them to build the banana instead of the house?
That's, again, the M is with themselves. They need to figure out how to motivate themselves, whether that be by like interruption by the third party, by the task giver, or by self-actualization.
Oh.
So,
So I'm going to pause you there for a second,
Yes.
okay? Because you have
Pause me all
some
you want.
good tidbits in there.
we can go into another podcast episode
Absolutely.
with that. Yeah.
One of the biggest things that he's hitting key on that I just want to bring to your all's attention is how he brought up the third-party task giver. That piece, especially when we're dealing with toddlers, is so critical. So, do you know who that third-party task giver is? That's you. That's you. That's me. So when I'm assigning that task, number one, when I listened to Loki talking about the dishes, he understood what the responsibility is. And then did you notice the term that he used? I could visualize what it looks like for the dishes.
Right.
And now it's extremely important because I think so many times we give instructions. We tell our kids, we want you to clean your room. All right, well, what's my version of a clean room? His version of a clean room and yours is going to be completely different.
That helps with the responsibility.
So then giving a visual prompt of the responsibility can come in as a motivating cue by the third party.
Right.
So moms and
You're getting
dads,
it.
what could you do in this area? You could have a chore list, okay? We've done it on the refrigerator.
Yep.
We've made a list.
Yep.
We've got visual prompts. And every time, how many of us have, and I can tell you, I'm raising my hand for those of you that can't see the podcast. I have gone horse. What is it? Laryngitis?
Oh.
It's been so long since I've had that. I forgot about the word. Telling our kids over and over again, do you have the dishes done? Do you have the trash taken out? Did you do your laundry? Did you go over the chore list over and over and over and over again? And the reality is, the only person that you're exhausting is yourself.
Yep. In my household, we call that the nagging parent. Because that's how we feel. We feel like we're nagging. We're trying to prompt. Yep.
And sometimes you have to be the nagging parent because they're not going to look at the check marks every single time.
That's the part right there. Did you just hear that? Sometimes you have to be the nagging parent. I'm going to change that. I don't think you have to. I think what you need to do is come up with a system and a response, because a lot of times parents, what I have seen is there's too much talking. Too much talking to the chore that's not being completed. And then what happens? So Loki, you do this. You zone me completely out.
Procrastination. You talk too much and then it's just sort of like, okay, when are you going to be done? That way I can finish the task because I understand now. Because you go under the whole ordeal of like saying, okay, yeah, you didn't do this and you didn't do this and this plate goes up there and this place goes up there, when you could have just said, Loki, you didn't get these dishes done. If you wanted to know where these dishes wanted to go, you could have just told me instead of going, and then I get zoned out where I was like, okay, yes, can I continue on with my task?
You got it. And age appropriate is as well.
Yeah. I was thinking as we were talking about, we have to be, as parents and caregivers, right? We have to, and business people too, we have to know who we're talking to.
Yes.
So if you have a young toddler, more likely you have to prompt, you have to remind, you have to keep going. But when you get to a certain age of teenagers, the prompting looks a little different. The reminding looks a little
Correct.
different. But not only that, hey, did you understand the instructions? Did you realize what we said? Do you agree that we talked about that? Okay, so now we got to talk about the lack of rewards.
Yes.
You didn't follow through. So let's discuss that.
Mhm.
But that's a different level. Employees the same. Did you understand the expectations?
Correct.
Did you understand
I
the
do that
task?
with some of the children I teach sometimes. Just like I say
Yes.
this and I say this and I say, okay, now if you understand, can you repeat it back to me?
Yeah.
Well, Manny and I have a colleague in the field that brought to our company Tell, Show, Do.
Tell, show, do.
Tell, Show, Do. I've told you how to do it. I've showed you how to do it.
Mhm.
And now we're going to do it.
Mhm.
Right.
And you can shape that multiple different ways because you could see that the learning was not there. But there is ultimately a time when the doing is by choice.
Mhm.
And
Now,
when you refuse to do something versus a lack of understanding to do it, that's when we then have to talk about, well, then what reward are you willing to give up because
Yeah.
you haven't done the task?
Mhm.
And as parents, what I'd like to do before we do our wrap up, because
Mhm.
there's so much good information here and so much more to come, is I want to remind you to please hit the follow, like, subscribe button. And then we have actually started a monthly Zoom call, and it's through our Mind Meld community. And so starting in July, you can have access to live Q&A between Tracy Duarte, our academic executive director, our clinical executive director, Dr. Manny, and myself. So we have gotten so many questions and we're answering those questions, but we wanted a format where parents can talk to us directly. And so we are making that available in July. So please look for all of that wonderful information that's available to you all, our subscribers and our fans. So going back to circle into our RMR, I think one of the biggest things that for me, I want to give a takeaway to our families, and I'm going to start this before we wrap it up because I'm a culprit of this. That's Pam just running off at the mouth. And that's why I've got this podcast. But sometimes too much information can cloud the child. Instead of focusing your energy on what they haven't done or the lack of motivation, focus your energy on the positive of what could have happened if that responsibility was completed.
Mhm.
So example, in Loki and I, the reason we joke about the power cord is because I don't argue about it anymore. There's no arguing in our house. You have these responsibilities. These don't get, what do I say? Loki, go get me the power cord.
and then I don't argue. I just get the power cord.
And that's how he knows it only took him 3 minutes if he would have done his task. But instead, he lost 12 hours of electronic time. And yes, Pam don't play. I don't ask for the phone.
I can vouch.
Nope. I just tell him to bring me the power cord. You can't turn it on if there's no power cord, right?
Yeah.
So that's my tidbit. My advice to parents when we're talking about this is not to get as wrapped up as I have in the past with your own energy in a situation when your child fails to hit the responsibility mark. Take a moment for yourself to pause and then look at, well, if we would have gotten this done, and I shape that because even from a 4-year-old to a 19-year-old, with the 4-year-old, well, mommy's got to clean up all these toys now, and we could be outside playing in the pool. But because mommy has to clean the toys, we have to do this together. Okay, Sally, clean up with me, but we could have been outside. And those are real conversations to have.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And same thing with my now 19, almost 20-year-old. Well, sorry, you can bring me the power cord, but tonight's VR night. And dishes have always been dishes, trash has always been trash, and laundry's always been laundry. So eliminating the excess energy when things don't come to fruition so that you can then shape the behavior
Yes.
of your student or child. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I think I'd follow up on that. It's going to sound kind of the same, but maybe a little bit different. I always find the hardest struggle is when you're in the heat of the moment and you're just stuck in it. Is parents, we don't take a good hard look and like a reality check of it's not working. And there's a former doctor on TV that I won't say because, we don't have rights, but he used to have a tagline that was always stuck with me. And it was like, how's it working for you? And if it ain't working for you, you got to do something different, because otherwise you fall victim to the definition of insanity, right? Trying to do the same thing over and over again, expect a different result. So the same thing applies with our kids, and especially when they're in learning stages. You apply the rule, you give the expectation, you think they have the responsibility, they understand it, but their motivation is somewhere else. So you use it as a learning opportunity. But what do we end up doing? We yell, we scream, whatever. Right? So if it's not working and it's not working well, then you got to do something different. That's my last tidbit.
And what about you, Luke? I'm going to let you lead us out tonight. Talk to our families and send us home.
I finally get to have a little bit of a speaking role. And I wanted to say towards the final thing, bringing it all back to RMR, responsibility, motivation, and reward. I'd like to say that this whole formula isn't really something that you can really, solve. It's not like a big life equation that you can really say, aha, I've got it, and everybody can now follow what I tell them to do. It's just simply a sequence that is going to happen. You're going to give or get the responsibility. You're going to have to rise yourself up and get the motivation to achieve that reward. You're always going to have to do that, and it's up to you to not get distracted and not get anything away from getting your responsibility scheduled, or getting tools to help you with your responsibility, getting any distractions to blockade you from your motivation, and figuring out the reward. That way you can achieve what you want to achieve, not anybody what else they want to achieve, what you want to achieve. Is that good for an outro?
I think that's great. So what do we say? From our couch to yours? We'll see you next time,
See you
families.
next time.